My name is Jay Hanna. This talk is about TIF, which is tax increment financing. And I am not a policy wonk. I'm kind of a data nerd, gopher, data monkey kind of guy. So if you want a lot of policy information on TIF, you might want to double check in your area compared to what I'm saying here. So what is TIF? So tax increment financing was originally conceived, depending on who you ask, to promote economic development in marginalized or blighted areas, right? And this is a really powerful tool that a city can use to get things that wouldn't otherwise be created in a community. So hopefully, if you're socially progressive, we can take some tax base and apply it to things that we all want but are not economically viable by themselves. We can support those things actually happening. So is that where your tax dollars are actually going? It's possible they are. Maybe your tax dollars are going to those social goods. But it's possible that your tax dollars are going to things that you wouldn't be happy about your tax dollars going to. So how do you know if that's what's happening in your area? Well, you're going to have to look at TIF where you live, because there is a wild variety of open data accessibility and application of TIF tax policy across the US and now in Canada. There's a big Montreal debate going on a couple months ago about whether or not TIF's entering Montreal. So if you're lucky, I happen to live in Nebraska. If you're lucky, there's a really good resource at the state level where you can see all the TIF that's going on in the entire state. So we have the Nebraska Department of Revenue has a department that handles this stuff. And there's that, all the data for the entire state is sitting there. In where you live, like in Illinois, you're gonna have a lot of city level and county level, separate, disparate information that's not aggregated, possibly, but you'll have to check it out. In Nebraska, there's been 1,092 TIF projects so far since 1992 that have been approved. So in Nebraska, we have the Property Assessment Division, and there's two options here. There's a PDF files option and an Excel files option. And if we look at the PDF file option, this is a 370-page PDF for 2016, which is really pretty for humans. Like if you're a human that wants to sit down for some light reading, this is great, right? On page 324, you'll find like an example. This is 370 pages. Page 324 might look like this. This one's the closest one to my house. So I found this one pretty interesting. So again, if you're a human reading a piece of paper, this is great. But if you're a data programmer trying to expose the information in aggregate, 370 pages a year of PDFs is not great. Fortunately, Nebraska, again at the state level, so props to them, excellent, has Excel files instead. So we can use Microsoft Excel files to pull this data out. So we did. We pulled all the Excel information out and stuck it in a SQLite database and then ripped it to a website. So now in the state of Nebraska, if you happen to live there, you can see that TIF has gotten pretty popular since 1992. By New York standards, this isn't a lot of money, but by Nebraska standards, this is quite a bit of tax money. And it gets more and more popular every year. You can click on your county, then you can click on your city. So here's my county. This is the county I live in, Sarpy County. In 2014, you'll notice TIF got a lot more popular where I live. If I click on the city, I don't actually live in Gretna. I live in a sanitary improvement district, so I actually dodged the bullet on this. But if I click on Gretna, which is right next to my house, I can see that in 2014, this thing called the Nebraska Crossing Smart Outlets Redevelopment kicked in pretty hard. And I'm like, oh, that's that strip mall between Omaha and Lincoln on I-80 as you're cruising along. There's a ton of like really high-end retail out in the middle of nowhere. And the Gretna tax base is paying for that. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad I don't live in Gretna because I don't shop there. So did I want my tax money, extra tax money, helping the developers redevelop this mall? Here's the details of it. So it was a strip mall, but it was floundering. So they leveled it and built a strip mall. Now, like I said, I don't live in Gretna, and if you do live in Gretna, maybe this adds a lot of tax base to your city and to your schools and stuff. I don't know the details. But if I was there, I'd be really interested in this dynamic because that's a lot of tax money. In Omaha is the largest city in Nebraska, and TIF is very popular and getting more popular. So the number one thing on here is the First National Office Tower. So First National Bank's a great bank. I bank there. It's the tallest building in the state of Nebraska. They built this huge, shiny, tallest building, broke the record a few years ago. And I love the bank, but I'm looking at this list and I'm like, wow, $40 million in tax breaks just on TIF for a bank downtown building the shiniest building in the state of Nebraska. That seems odd to me, but I don't live in Omaha, so that's not my tax money, so, maybe I don't care about that one either. And maybe this one is now ending, but $3 million a year in tax breaks to the developers that built the skyscraper seems like a lot of money. So anyway, how did we do that? So the Department of Revenue has all these Excel spreadsheets. We're going to dump them all into SQLite, and then we're going to make a static website so we can just throw those files out anywhere and just serve them. So here's how we did that, and it's all on GitHub, so you can join along or check it out or fix bugs or whatever you want to do. So our that SQL file is the schema. It's just 2 tables. It's just projects and years. Refresh schema is a DBIX class ORM, which is kind of handy to have laying around. So it uses a DBIX class schema loader to create the ORM, so now you just have one-liners to I/O the database if you want to. And then LoadDB is the thing that actually reads from the Excel spreadsheets and loads the database up. Really simple stuff, except the normalization gets a little bit tricky because each of these tax years in the Excel spreadsheet says things about 10 years of history, right? So the 2016 file says things about 2006 through 2016. The 2015 file says things about 2005 through 2015. You would think that both of those files would agree on 2013 data. They do not. So silly me, when I wrote the program, I was like, oh, hey, we're just going to die. We're going to blow up if we see something that was not what the previous file said, because you would think that they would know 2012 data by like 2014. Surely that's set in stone, but it's not. So it throws a lot of warnings, etc. The normalization of the data is the most interesting part. And then the communication with the Department of Revenue saying, help, what's happening? Like why in 2014 was 2009 this, and then in 2015, 2009 was different. That was interesting. So anyway, once we've got it in SQLite, we can just generate www using template toolkit and spit out the entire static website that we saw earlier. So that works out pretty good. The simplest possible software that could do our goal, thrown into Twitter Bootstrap, just so hopefully it works on mobile devices and stuff. So we get this little website. You can hover over it and see these different amounts in the red and the green and all this stuff. It's pretty slick. Okay, so say you have access to historical TIF. Say you live in Nebraska, and now I wrote this TIF report for you, and you have access to information. You live in Gretna, let's say. And you now know and are super pleased or super displeased about one of the things. What do you do about that? Well, this varies wildly. In the city of Omaha, it's the Omaha City Council that decides all these things, discusses all these things. And I've heard that city council-based decision-making is popular, but it might vary. It might be state, it might be local, it might be subdivisions, it could be plats, it could be whatever, right? So you'd have to check locally and see what's going on. In our case, the Omaha City Council makes all these decisions. Well, in Omaha's case, again, I live in a sanitary improvement district, I don't pay taxes towards TIF, but in Omaha's case, we get 40 PDFs like this every year. This one's 38 pages long. The meeting starts, page 27, item 60. They're like, oh, hey, we're making a decision or an announcement or a pre-decision or a pre-announcement or we've changed our minds or whatever about tax increment financing. So the policy wonks who are wanting to hold city council members accountable for their votes on these things, thank you. They really want this information. Like, they want to see specifically item 60 on page 27 of this specific file, but they want to go all the way back to 1992, and now they're looking at 100 hours of PDF, control F, right? So we thought it might be kind of helpful to take these 362 PDF files, again, that's all open source, 362 PDF files, run them through a text converter, and then use Perl to convert it into Markdown if it's TIF relevant, based on a really cheesy regex, right? That I've adjusted 15 times because there's exceptions and whatever. So I wrote this stuff, and hopefully it's helpful to people who are brave enough to try to dive through massive PDF archives and go to lots of city council meetings. It generates Markdown that looks like this. There's one Markdown file per year, and all it did was pluck out item 60 and say, hey, that might be relevant, item 60 on that date. And this stuff is all committed to GitHub too. So hopefully that helps people. Other cool things we could do with this, like if there's discrepancies in the voting records in the city council minutes about TIF, that would be interesting. Most of these things are unanimous, and text votes are extremely boring. And unless a citizen steps up and really fights one of them, these things seem to be rubber stamped. But maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's not at all accurate. So those are what it appears to be. If we get the voting records of who the city council members who voted for the TIFs, that'd be kind of cool in a database, maybe. How do we pull that out? Like natural language processing of that PDF minutes file? I don't know. Sometimes it's too late. By the time you say, wait, what? You're going to give $8 million to this thing that's ridiculous? I don't need another baseball stadium. Maybe public alerts would be great. Like maybe knowing that the agenda item said that this was for consideration in 2 meetings or whatever, that could alert people who care. That'd be cool. Easy to understand project summaries. The plat descriptions, well, we'll get to that. Discussing things, let you use your Facebook account to argue about stuff on the internet. And arguing on the internet is the most productive thing ever, right? So maybe we add that, but I don't want to be the one who's moderating, and we probably have to moderate it. And then geolocation. Well, geolocation gets really interesting because the data is legal descriptions, and I'm no lawyer, but I can't for the life of me understand a lot of legal descriptions of a property. So how do you pull GPS lat long out of this stuff and put a big map, big Google map? Wouldn't that be slick? Yeah. So I had one volunteer for 2 hours and they quit. If it's even accurate.
Right.
Right. Who knows? Yeah. So I did all that for Nebraska. Vermont, hey, they've got a thing with actual APIs and you can download spreadsheets and stuff. Like this is an actual data repository kind of something or other. I haven't played with this yet, but I saw it just Googling. And I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. Maybe we should move towards a much more dynamic API-driven kind of deal. So what I would ask is, what is the TIF information in where you live? Because I registered this domain tif.report, and I have a sliver of pride about nebraska.tif.report, but if you live in New York, and you want ny.ny.tif.report, that'd be great. I would love to delegate those domains to you, and let's figure it out. Is it possible that stuff could be aggregated? I have no idea. Until we know even where the data is, I don't know how you would go about aggregating, but that would be pretty slick. So, yeah. Any questions? Do I have 2 minutes? I have 5 minutes? Oh, awesome. Was that my slides? Those were my slides. All right, any questions? Yeah.
So most of the PDFs actually one problem with PDF processing.
Yeah, what I did was all PDF to text. The biggest problem with the PDFs is they say, click here to see attachment. And then they change file servers over the years. So 3 years ago, click here no longer resolves. So you can't see that attachment even if you wanted to. And this is assuming you're a human that really is interested in this specific project. All I'm doing is text conversion for the minutes. For the data, it's Excel. For the dollar figures. I just stream mode PDF to text. Yeah.
How dramatically different, if anywhere, Excel file?
Not too bad, and they even changed a couple of them for me. Like when they changed stuff around that was incompatible, I would just email them and ask them, did you know that you did this? And they're like, oh, you need to update your Microsoft Excel. And I'm like, well, I'm using OpenOffice or whatever. And a couple times they changed it, but they were very responsive. They're to the credit of the Property Assessment Division, Nebraska Department of Revenue, they were very responsive to that. It wasn't too bad. So the program had to kind of shuffle, but not too bad. Yeah.
Why did it
Because they were wrong, and now they're right. They were fixing the data was wrong. Yeah. So. Yeah, like the original. Sorry, I should be repeating the question. So the question was, did you overwrite the bad data with the new data? Originally, my program explodes, and then I go to the policy wonk guy, and I'm like, "What do we do about this?" And he's like, "Just throw warnings." So I was throwing 2,000 warnings, and then it turned into, okay, we're just going to take whatever they most recently said about that thing and just assume that it's right. So I still have a log. Like if you go into the Dropbox of the program that runs, there's a log of all the warnings. This is all the times they change their minds about a specific data point, but it just overwrites, yeah. Only like with my eyeballs on like 20 data points. I was like, because sometimes it's just a better description, which is great. Like sometimes they just go in there and they just say, okay, well, we're gonna be more informative in the description. There were a couple descriptions that changed. I was like, that seems to be changing the nature of the TIF. Was that on purpose? I don't know. And then the dollar figures, I don't know why, so I don't know. If there are conspiracies there, I'm not aware of them. Yeah, the report in the Dropbox, if you just look at the report in the Dropbox, it tells you what changed and when it changed. And, I pointed them to that and I said, hey, and they're like, oh yeah, we fixed stuff, so. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm over now, so. Ready, Joe? Oh, 10-minute break. Thank you, everyone.